At the hall after lunch, I think we did disaster relief here. So, for this session, we have three very distinguished speakers. Before I introduce them to you, I'll just call them on the stage first. Mr. Nidhirat Srisirirojanakorn, to the stage, please. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Please have a seat. And next, Mr. Arnel Capili. Yes. The man from our center we've been listening to from the morning. Yeah, please. Join us. And finally, the best of the group, we saved the best for last, Miss Murni, Binti, and Amin. Okay, now that we have this panel, session 3, this panel will share existing mechanisms and tools available to provide for HADR capacity building and operation in the region and in Malaysia. So basically, we'll be looking at mechanisms and tools that are existing and how these can be used in the region and also in Malaysia. So before we proceed, I'd like to ask the panel who would like to go first, so that I can send you to be 1, 2, 3. Okay, you see consensus here. So we'll start with Mr. Nidhirat. As you know, he's a very handsome Thai gentleman, and he's with UN OCHA in the Thai regional office for Asia Pacific in Bangkok since 2006, so 13 years working on the disaster relief. He's an analyst actually, and he's been around. He's been around the region and also out doing all kind of work. He's got education background from Chulalongkorn University, Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex, and also graduate from the University of Lund, Sweden. So today, his subject, he will be sharing with us some of the aspects of what UN OCHA does, and he will share with us maybe some best practices from UN OCHA, and also he will look at the tools and the mechanisms in the region, some past events and all that, and I hope that we can take some good information from him and prepare that for question and answer session. Mr. Nidhirat, please.
Hi, good afternoon. I should look at this way. So, my part, right after lunch. Oh wait, right? Actually, there's never a good part. When you got the first session, they said it's too early. And the one before lunch, they said everyone is hungry. And now after lunch, everyone is sleepy. So, I don't know. I guess they're all the same thing. So my sessions, in fact, our sessions cover 3 big domains in disaster response. The national government. In our Southeast Asia in particular, we have the regional part of the response, and we have also the international elements. So we have 3 of us here. My little responsibility for the next 15 minutes focus a little bit on the international elements. So I put up the title International Humanitarian Coordination Mechanisms and Tools, but I put in wording national and regional, just not to forget that we are part of the bigger equation here. And in fact, I'll show you in the slide later that we are actually a small part of the equation. Alright, and this was what was given to us. So share mechanisms and tools available to provide for HADR capacity building and operations in the region in Malaysia, let's say in the region and in the country. So I'm going to take this as my problem statement. I'm going to tackle the next 15 minutes with this question in the backdrop. The way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to share with you some of the international tools. And sometimes my colleagues say it's a global tools, but I want to make it clear that when we say global or international, it doesn't mean in any from ASEAN perspective as a Thai. Sometimes when we talk about international standards or international tools, we imply that it has higher hierarchy or somewhat higher standard than the national standards. And I just want to make this point here. When we talk about international standard, especially in the ASEAN context, it's a generic global standard. It doesn't mean that it's better or worse than the ASEAN standard we have. And I want to put that point forward. And secondly, I'll talk about how this different response mechanism and tools has contributed to the disaster operations in our regions, as well as this whole idea of building capacity for the national capacity, as well as regional capacity. Leon mentioned this a little bit with her word about whole of societies. And yes, disaster response is the whole of society activities, I'll put it that way. A couple of speakers before also said, well, what we responding unless there is a request from the government or the exception by the government. And that's primarily based on the principle, as we know, this whole idea of sovereignties. And affected states have to accept this assistance before international assistance or regional assistance can actually come in. And by way of looking at whole of society, this little graphic, probably, I don't know if you can see. The main point is to put the focus back on the affected population, right? We used to be focused on our as what we want to give, rather than what people want to receive. And be it complex emergency or natural disaster, this is a valid point that people is the center of the response. And that the first responder is always the local communities. And that the national government has a role, has a mandate by the national law to respond to disaster in its country. If the requirement of that particular disaster exceed of all the national capacity, again, in the ASEAN region, we like to say it exceeds our capacity, it's kind of overwhelmed at that particular time, then there'll be support from externals outside of the countries, and those are the blue line, thin blue line at the outskirts of the circle. We talk about bilateral agreements, bilateral support, regional support, and multilateral support. And this morning, a couple of speakers also mentioned that, like what Malaysia is working with Bangladesh in Capt, and many activities are mainly bilateral. And that's the reality of today's response as well. The majority of the response in this world is bilateral. However, a lot of focus was given to this UN, if I could say, people sometimes think it's the UN-led or it's an international response, partly for many reasons. PRs will be one of them. So in fact, if we look at the international response, we always say that the bilateral is primarily take the center stage in the humanitarian landscape. And the international element is pretty small. It's almost a tip of the iceberg. It got a lot of attention. And that's what I want to put as the backdrop for the next few slides. Yes, we work with national authority, with regional organizations, and in support of this particular actor. And in no way we try to say that the international response operation of international mechanism and tools will supersede national and regional standards. So just to tackle the question earlier on this contribution to operations as well as capacity building. I think traditionally, so I put all this two domains first, international communities and national or affected state perspective, right? And when I say international communities, it doesn't compose just the UN as the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. it has an NGO, international NGO family as well. However, I can only, as much as I try to be as inclusive as possible, most of the tool and mechanism I'll be talking today come from pretty much from culture perspective. And there'll be some specific, sector-specific tools, as well as the capacity building elements, capacity building initiative of those very specific sector, of which I may not be able to cover today. So traditionally, we work with national governments of affected state. The UN has office in most of the countries, and therefore we work with national authorities, right? When there is a disaster, we support the national authorities, designate one, in the support, be it coordination or actually delivery of the system. However, in this particular Southeast Asian region, we know that it's slightly different from many regions in the way that we have the ADMIR, for example, which is the only regional legally binding document available. And so we have ASEAN and we have AHA Center, right? So the international communities, I would say after 2008 typhoon, when there was cyclone Nidhirat, we start to see things slightly different by way of just not looking at our previous mandate and the way we operate before, whereby we always work with the national authorities in supporting them in response operation and in capacity building. But we are now looking at an ASEAN or a regional entity that is legally mandated to support coordination of its human activities in the regions. So we support ASEAN and AHA Center, and we work with them in many ways, knowing that in turn ASEAN will support the country or affected state, right? But however, this is not an either-or thing, right? It's not just like, okay, if you have ASEAN, then there is no international component, or if there is international component, there is no ASEAN. I think most likely it will be the combinations of the international support and the regional support. So in the same theaters or location, you may see both. And I know that Palu was one of the examples we see last year that while there'll be a time where the government may say they only want AHA Center to lead and support that kind of modalities. And we learn to adapt and will continue to work as flexible as possible to fit in this direction by the affected state, right? So it could be just like Palu. Yet, I think in terms of statistics and population sample, we still have yet to see in the future what would be actually the modalities of or the preference of response modality in ASEAN country. We talk a lot even among us and AHA Center colleagues about maybe the future Palu will be the model. We also don't know. So for the sake of preparedness, we'll continue to prepare for many scenarios. The one whereby AHA Center will lead the coordination of international support. That could be one option. And there be another option whereby we explore various different scenarios where we could possibly be doing the traditional way where AHA Center will coordinate the ASEAN elements and the broader international component may be coordinated by broader international human communities. OCHA is one of those organization mandated to coordinate this international response. But that's it, as the way we see how we contribute to the operations as well as capacity building in the regions. And way in which I see one of our quite significant contributions so far in disaster response, preparedness, operation, and as well as capacity building in the regions is the way the cluster system was rolled out. So I hope you're familiar a little bit with the cluster. That it's basically the way that international humanitarian communities at the global level has agreed that when there is a big major emergencies, this is the way in which they would coordinate. So they have come up with 11 generic group of thematic grouping of words, right? And these are basically the 11 identified areas that they said in any big emergency, these are 11 areas that is quite problematic, that need stronger leadership, that would lead to better predictabilities. So the cluster was born, and it was applied in many, many big emergencies after 2005. The first time it was applied in Pakistan, 2005 earthquake. But then cluster has been rolled out in many countries, including many countries in ASEAN. And its country in ASEAN again led this process of nationalized cluster systems. Philippines was the first country where cluster was adjust and adapt to fit the way the government would respond to disaster in the country by grouping the same agency that has similar mandate and work on the same particular thematic issue together. And then followed by Indonesia, and I understand that Malaysia is now exploring the way in which they could adopt the cluster system as well. So that's how I see, if you ask me what has been some contribution from the international mechanism and tools to the national response operations and coordination structure, how the cluster is one that I could see easily in this region. Yet, cluster is not just about operation and response, right? Say, we talk about World Food Program is the logistic cluster leaders, right? It's not just doing logistics during disaster. They do provide a lot of capacity training as well. We have a lot of training on logistics, and not just for the national components. They also provide logistic training to the regional organization like ASEAN as well. The same way we work from OSHA perspective. It's not just coordination during emergency, during operation. We also work with AHA Center. We work with many of NDO to support their coordination skill and capacity as well. So this cluster, if you look at it and twist it around, it's the basis on how I look at this question today, right? So we work in operation. We use cluster as a sort of agreed coordination mechanism. And the same way, that cluster can be twisted around to be the way we start capacity building based on these different thematic areas as well. And now that's what I mentioned, right? There are actually many tools and mechanisms, and the international humanitarian community is a big community, so I won't be able to share all the tools available in this world. But most of the tools I'm talking about is pretty much from OSHA perspective and looking pretty much, because it's from OSHA perspective, it's more on the coordination, on the overview of the big picture. There are, however, sector-specific tools. We talk about wash, health, shelter. There are tools available for country to use, for the regional organization to use, for the regional organization to build specific capacity on that particular sector as well. However, those I won't be able to cover today. And the one I want to cover in particular is pretty common in our regions. It's the use of this assessment team. And we're quite familiar with the team, the ANDA team, right? So on the top left is the ANDA. Basically, we talk about disaster response, and the team required are the team that can mobilize very fast, that can support the governments, the national governments, as well as the humanitarian community in the country to kickstart their operation, to give the common assessment of the situations, as well as to support coordinations. Secondly, the INSAR, which is pretty much linked to the urban search and rescue. This is pretty much true in our region where earthquake is one of the big hazard profile in Indonesia and Philippines. So in any big emergency when there is an earthquake, there's always fallen structure, and therefore there's a need in the urban area to have an urban search and rescue. And INTER is the international tool that coordinates international urban search and rescue team coming into the field to support the national governments. Then both of this UNRWA and INTER are closely linked to one structure called OSOC, the On-Site Operation Coordination Centers, which is basically the physical space where coordination happens. When we talk about coordination, it's hard to give a definition, but definitely coordination is about information sharing. It's about common operation pictures. And fortunately, unfortunately, coordination ends up a lot with being coordination meetings. So this physical space is very important. And the idea of having this OSOC is to have this space whereby people can coordinate and communicate. And the last one I want to highlight is the tool that we have is civil-military coordinations. And one of the ways in which we contribute to these particular regions, for example, this morning we heard about the Oslo guideline, is to contextualize many of these principles and guidelines into the Asian Pacific context, whereby we know that the use of military assets in Asian Pacific is quite contradictory to the last resort concept. So we support the regions in having this consultation and drafting their own guidelines, as well as having their own platform to discuss civil-military coordination in the region in particular. So these are the 4 response tools and mechanisms that I see has a lot of contributions. And when we talk about coordination with ASEAN in particular, a lot of this tool has been discussed and worked with the regional organization. The UNDER transferred into the IRED team, the OSOC transferred into the JOCA, the Joint Operation Coordination Center of ASEAN. And the SIMCOR is now being transferred into civil-military coordination in the ASEAN context. And yes, if you want to know more, we actually have a guide for disaster management that actually explain all these tools in details. I'm running out of my 15 minutes. So if you have time, you can Google and look for this disaster response in Asian Pacific. And all the tools that I mentioned earlier are in there. And I would conclude my time here now before I got bashed by our people. But yes, thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Nidhirat covered a lot of what OCHA does. OCHA is a UN agency and covers the global region where we require humanitarian assistance. And of course, he elaborated on United Nations disaster assessment and also the OSOC, the ground team. And these are our main platforms where regional, similar regional platforms can work with. So that means once they are the global level, the regional level can be parallel to them. So when we want to talk about regional level, we have now our next speaker, Mr. Arnel from AHA Center, which is our regional ASEAN Humanitarian Assistance Center. We will listen to Arnel, who has 15 years worth of experience. And for your information, ladies and gentlemen, the next 2 speakers are assessment people. They've got regional assessment capability. We heard that analysts, and then the next 2 speakers will be the people who will be doing assessment on disaster management. It's a very difficult job to do. And you will hear from Arnel and later from Murni. Arnel, as just like the previous speaker, has traveled wide and far, and he's been in AHA Center since 2012. And over the last 7 years, he has led a lot of ASEAN efforts, and most importantly, Typhoon Haiyan. So he's a hands-on man. He's got a lot of academic background, especially from Australia and Philippines. And today we will listen to him on what AHA Center does on tools and mechanisms, managing disaster relief. And over to you.
Thank you, Captain Martin. Good afternoon. Can you just keep the light on? The speaker is more important than the slides. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just to keep you awake, I'll stand in front so that I don't hide behind the podium. My name is Arnel Capili. I have been with the AHA Center for the last 7 years, or since it was established. I'm the last of the remaining dinosaurs within the AHA Center. Keep the light on, please. No, the first speaker talked about the international mechanism. We were cruising at 35,000 feet. Can we keep the light on, please? Okay. We were cruising at 35,000 feet at the global level. Nidhirat talked about the United Nations International Tools and Mechanisms. At this point, let's bring it down to a notch lower. This is where the pilot will now say, cabin crew, prepare for landing. Landing will be when we reach Malaysia. So at this point now, I'll bring you to the regional level where we talk about ASEAN tools and mechanisms. I come from AHA Center, long title, ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance on Disaster Management. Such a mouthful. Difficult to remember. But AHA Center, AHA, can also stand for ASEAN Helping ASEAN. That will make you remember what AHA Center stands for. That is what we want to do, and that is what the aspiration of our leaders when we created AHA Center, is to be able to help ASEAN helping ASEAN. Are there ASEAN member states here other than Malaysians? Can you just raise your hand? I have 3 here, 2 there, and back there. All right. Thank you. It's not working. All right. We always talk about ASEAN as the region as being the most disaster-prone country, disaster-prone region in the whole world. Let's answer that by facts, and let's look at the numbers. This is from the Center for Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters. Over the last 18 years, 2 countries have prominently been listed as those who have been had most number of deaths in the last 18 years, and that would be Indonesia and Myanmar. And you would remember those 2 significant major disasters, right? And if we look at the top 5 deadliest disasters from 2000 to 2018, you would also see Indian Ocean tsunami and as well as the Cyclone Nargis in Myanmar, the 2 biggest disasters in the history of ASEAN. And why am I mentioning this? Because those 2 disasters in our history pushed our leaders to sign an agreement called the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response, or ADMER for short. And I'll talk more about that in the next few slides. Bringing it down to the ASEAN level, look at this slide. Asia, the green one, top all the other regions in terms of the total number of reported disasters from 1900 to 2019. So it's quite telling and revealing that we are indeed the most disaster-prone region in the whole world. Let's bring it down to the level of the ASEAN member state. Look at those spikes in terms of total number of deaths in ASEAN. Those 2, actually 3 spikes. There's a small one little one here, the green. The 2 big ones are Myanmar and Indonesia, and the small spike in 2013. Do you remember what that was? Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. So those 3 disasters in the region significantly changed how we deal with disasters, how we manage with disasters in our region. Let's talk about what it created and what it established because of those 2, let's say 3, large-scale disasters in the region. First is the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response. This is different from all the other agreements and documents within ASEAN. Why? For the simple reason that ADMER is legally binding. all our member states who are signatories to the ADMER must be able to follow the stipulations of what is inside the agreement. Our ministers for foreign affairs signed this document. However, looking at the ASEAN member states, this has to be fully implemented up to this time. It was signed in 2005, full force in effect in 2009, and to this day, it still has to be really implemented to the level of the member states at the national level, down to the subnational level. This document also paved the way for the creation of an organization which would ensure that we can operationalize whatever is inside the legally binding document called ADMER. And this gave birth to my organization, which is AHA Center. AHA Center is the operational engine of ADMER, and its function is to facilitate cooperation and collaboration among member states, as well as all the parties and stakeholders involved in disaster management. This is the body that has been tasked by our leaders to coordinate the efforts of the ASEAN. And I'd like to point out this very important provision inside the document, that AHA Center will never respond to any disaster if it is not welcomed by the affected member state or it has not been requested. And we'd like to make that clear because that is respecting the sovereignty of the member state, as well as respecting that it is a nationally led response. AHA Center will only step in if we are asked by the affected country to go in and support, or we offer them and they say, yes, please come in and support our response. These are our bosses. We report to them. Collectively, they sit as the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management. They are the national disaster management agencies of the 10 countries. For Malaysia, it is NADMA. It used to be NSC before the change of, before the restructuring, the National Security Council. Now it's with the National Disaster Management Agency of Malaysia called NADMA. What is interesting here is that these NDMOs, or National Disaster Management Organizations, have different reporting lines. Meaning there are different ministries in charge of their NDMOs, and that's something for us to consider. For example, if you look at Vietnam, anyone from Vietnam here? Look at the NDMO of Vietnam. The NDMO of Vietnam is under the Ministry of Agriculture. The NDMO of the Philippines is under the Defense Department. The NDMO of Singapore is part of the Home Affairs because they're firefighters as well. The NDMO of Indonesia is a standalone because they are a ministry by themselves. So different configurations. So we have to understand the perspective and where they come from to be able to work and relate to all these NDMOs. Collectively, they sit as the AHA Center Governing Board as well. And the ASEAN Secretariat is as an ex-officio member of the ACDM. And in very large-scale disasters, we can activate the Secretary General of ASEAN, meaning the member states can activate the Secretary General of ASEAN in his capacity as the humanitarian assistance coordinator for ASEAN. Meaning, he has this political role, right? If we cannot get a plane flying at our level, at the operational level, perhaps the Secretary General, by push of a button, because he has direct links with the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, heads of state, he can pick up the phone and call the Prime Minister and request an aircraft to fly the relief items to wherever the affected member country would be. That is his political push, and that is where we will leverage on his capacity as the humanitarian assistance coordinator. Just to show you where we are at the Jakarta office. This is the Emergency Operations Center of the AHA Center. We were generously provided one floor from the NDMO of Indonesia, represented by Pak Medi here. So the government of Indonesia gave us one full floor from their NDMO and said, AHA Center, you can stay with us and you can stay in that particular floor. They gave us a 13th floor, very lucky number for us. And we appreciate the BNPB for giving us the luckiest floor inside the building of the NDMO. This is where we make decisions whether to engage in a disaster or not, based on the permutations, based on the data, based on the capacity. This is where we make decisions whether to dispatch our team, offer our assistance, or provide support, technical support to our member states. By far, last 7 years, we have been involved in some 30 medium to large-scale disasters in the region. That's where we get our experience now. We have been involved in all types of hazards, including this response right now to Rakhine. We have been requested by the ASEAN leaders that Center please find ways to support the repatriation in Rakhine. Not our bread and butter. Our bread and butter for our center is natural disasters. But right now we are being called to support the repatriation process. And that's why we have been heavily involved in the discussions, both in Northern Rakhine, in Mongdo. I have been the ERA team leader who went there for the preliminary needs assessment to understand the repatriation plan. And also I have been to Cox's Bazar to start a discussion with the displaced population over at the other side. And this has to continue. And I've been discussing with Lilian how we can better enhance these discussions with both parties so that we can resolve the conflict on a process according to how it should be done procedurally. Some of the tools now, moving on to some tools, I'm going to make it quite quick. We have SASOC. You heard about SASOC earlier this morning. SASOC is our SOP. Very long title, but just remember it's Standby Arrangement SOPs. This defines how we offer assistance, how we request assistance, how member states are going to deal with each other. This is very good because it reduces the confusion. For example, when a government offers assistance, it defines what the assistance will be. So in the past, I remember that there was a member state who said, I want to give this, and this. And we sent this to the particular affected country, and the affected country said, we like this, no, we don't need this. So it's very clear. So whatever is going to be offered is what is going to be according to the priorities of the affected member country. It also defines here who will take care of, for example, duties, customs. So there are no confusion. In the past, we dealt with issues like a member state flying in resources and sitting at the airport at the tarmac because no one knew who will shoulder, who will cover the taxes. And that's a problem. And it sits there at the airport, clogging the runway, making it more difficult, making it more logistically challenging for the affected member country. With this, it's clear. Member states will say, okay, I will take care of everything, duties, taxes, whatever is required, so that this assistance can be provided. Or the affected country will say, all assistance, as long as it is for this particular disaster, will be waived. So that is clear to us, and SASOC makes sure about that. In SASOC, we also recently added Chapter 6, or the use of foreign military assets, particularly in the ASEAN region. Chapter 6 talks about the involvement of the military in any disaster response in the region. And this was developed by the ASEAN defense ministers, endorsed as well by the other sector, the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management. And it follows the same principle. It reflects guidelines, Oslo guidelines, it reflects the MCDA guidelines as well. But in our region, we have our own playbook. I asked this question earlier to Colonel about, in the region, military response first. Particularly because they have the resources, they have the capacity, and they have the discipline, most importantly. And then it paves the way for a civilian-led transition. Normally, in the first few days, that's where the military comes in, particularly for our region. They have all the toys that we need. Civilian side will also always rely on the military if they need to fly things, if they need to move things. So that's where I think the principle of this came about. I won't deal with this because this is a diagram that can that is probably as organized as it can look. In a real disaster, it's probably not going to happen. This is an aspiration, a guide for us when we work together in terms of coordination. Coordination is very challenging. At least this diagram gives us an indication of how we will work together with the OCHA people, with the UN people, with the EOC affected country on the ground. So this is our suggested protocol in terms of coordination. I'll talk about some of the tools that we have. Captain Martin talked about assessment. We have a team called ASEAN ERAT, Emergency Response and Assessment Team, ERAT, ERAT. In the past, it was called Rapid Assessment Team, but the acronym is not nice, ASEAN RAT. So we changed it and we put an Emergency Response and Assessment Team, it became ERAT. In Bahasa Indonesia, what is the meaning of ERAT ba? Close, tight, right? So that is a personification of how we work together within the team itself. So ASEAN ERAT is a team rapidly deployable, trained through a standard induction course, 100 hours induction course. They train to do 3 things: coordination, rapid assessment, and humanitarian logistics. Those are their expertise. And they come in to support the affected country. So when the affected government requests the ERAT deployment, we fly them to the ground and they say, "Sir, we're here. What do you want us to do?" They report to the NDMO of the affected country. They get guidance, they get instructions from the NDMO of the affected country. Currently, we have about 350 in our roster, trained, all ASEAN member states. And we want to expand that further so that we expand the roster as well, meaning we get more skills. Right now, the defense is quite small. We want to get more defense people in our ASEAN ERAT roster. Maybe of the 350, we only have about 3% from the defense sector. We have to change that. Also, from the health sector, we have to increase that. One ASEAN, one response is about bringing all the sectors together. It's not just the NDMO, but all the sectors helping, supporting the response should be part of the response. That's one ASEAN, one response. How do we coordinate? 3 levels: strategic, operational, and tactical. It may be different from how we define it from the military language, but this is our language. Strategic is where we discuss it with the ambassador level committee of permanent representatives so that they have a clear understanding of what's going on the ground. At that level, they can make also the political push from the ASEAN member countries. They're sitting in Jakarta, the core committee of permanent representatives. They are your representatives to the ASEAN with the ambassador level rank. And we give them a briefing, defense attaches as well. And that's where we have a common understanding of what the needs are. At the operational level, this may be at the capital of the affected country. So if it is in Indonesia, it should be in Jakarta. When I left Jakarta, it was still Jakarta, but probably it will be different in the next few years. Right, Amin? If it is in Vietnam, it will be in Hanoi. If it is in the Philippines, it will be in Manila. So that's where the operational level discussions take place. Meaning, we establish the communication lines with the National Disaster Management Agency so that we receive their priorities. Again, we are there to support them, not to run things for them. They know better than anyone, and we go there to support them. At the tactical level, I'll talk about JOCA, the Joint Operations and Coordination Center for ASEAN. This is where all the ASEAN member states on the ground responding can be together and coordinate with each other. We need a facility, a physical space for the member states to be able to talk and share resources. That is all about JOCA. So those are the 3 levels of coordination that we have in place. JOCA links up with the UN if they will establish the OSOC. So many acronyms, I'm very sorry about that, but just remember that these are coordination platforms on the ground, be it with the UN, OSOC, or the ASEAN JOCA. Now, moving forward, and I'm almost winding down now, I have 18 slides. This is where our leaders said, we want to have one ASEAN, one response. This was the declaration in 2016. It's about us bringing all the sectors together. As I mentioned earlier, in the past, in any response, we work in silos, right? This is the defense military response. This is the social welfare response. This is the health sector response. With one ASEAN, one response, what we want to do is break down the walls. There are no walls anymore. Walls should be coming down like Aini saying, no more walls, right? Or no more time. So this is where we need to move together and act as one to coordinate our response so that we add value to the affected member state. I will skip that one because it's quite long. ASEAN Joint Disaster Response Plan is about predictability. We have mentioned 3 large-scale disasters in the region that might require international humanitarian response. And those 3, based on our discussions with the academics, one is the 7.2 Metro Manila earthquake. Number 2 is the 8.9 Mentawai megathrust affecting the coastline of Sumatra. And third is a cyclone Nardis type of cyclone hitting Myanmar again. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are preparing for. A large-scale, potentially large-scale response and understanding what our ASEAN response would be in terms of supporting those gaps that will be identified by industry large-scale disasters. Predictability. I'll skip that one, but this is where Typhoon Haiyan, this is Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. This is where Joka started. You see here the Malaysian flag with a Brunei military guy with the former executive director of a center in the Philippine flag. We wanted a space for us to be able to join our forces together. I think Colonel Sakri from Malaysia was also on the ground. So we needed space together. We needed a place where we could interact and coordinate and collaborate. And this is where Joka was born in Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. I'll skip to that and just conclude that saying that at the end of the day, we must forget where we belong. I always say this is, let's forget about logonitarian response, where we bring our logos to the ground and we want to have our logos taken, a picture of. Let's forget about that. It's not about that anymore. It's about us thinking about the affected community. Wherever your logo is, whatever your organization, it doesn't matter at all, as long as you can provide help and assistance to where it is needed most. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping the session awake. And some description on our center. So now the eagle has landed, and we have the landing zone now with Murni, National Disaster Management Agency from Malaysia. And interestingly, she's also an assessment person, but with UNDEP. She's done a lot of work in Central Sulawesi earthquake and so much more here. But the one that perplexes me is she's a bachelor degree of computer science. So I'm wondering, what's a computer science graduate doing in disaster relief? So it must be a passion. So let's give a round of applause for the best of what we have there.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. So my name is Murni Amin. So I'm the Principal Assistant Director for Division of Operation Coordination of NAMA Malaysia. Today I just want to share my perspective, being as Kunda, United Nations Disaster Assessment Coordination Team, and also as Nidhirat Arnel asked me to also. So I'm also one of the ASEAN Emergency Response Center Assessment Team, and also one of the coordinators for Hadr in the coalition. So pretty much for the last one, I'm going to try to integrate the whole mechanism, the whole tools, what have been mentioned by the Nidhi and also Arnel when it comes to Malaysia. Okay. So as Nidhi said, so when it comes to humanitarian community, it's actually each state itself has the primary responsible. So that's why NAMA have to have a clear roles of each actors during the disaster. Then we know there will be like a task redundancy, or maybe they actually have hiccups or also difficulties when it comes to coordination. So when it comes to during humanitarian assistance and disaster management, NADMA is actually the focal point for Malaysia. Before this is National Security Council, but now with the establishment of the NADMA, it's actually been taken by NADMA for this one. And besides being that, we also actually coordinate the disaster risk reduction management initiatives. We also involve in the prevention, mitigation, preparedness. There's numbers of initiatives. And we also, of course, doing the response nationally and internationally, if when required. And of course, the recovery and build back better. So this is pretty much a structure when it comes to, I extract it from the National Security Council Directive number 20, which is pretty much a main guideline for disaster management coordination mechanism in Malaysia. So as you can see, we also, as Arnel mentioned, in coordination it can be like categorized with the strategic level, operational level, and tactical level. And you may see actually in the tactical, strategic level, operational and tactical, there's always the involvement and the presence of militaries, even though from the level of national, states, and also the district. So we can see that actually we do have in Malaysia, we do have a close relationship with the militaries. And this in Malaysia, so we have like a disaster on-scene zoning mechanism. This is where actually we try to, with the national mechanism, we want it to like integrate with the international or regional mechanism whenever they come to Malaysia, if we accept that. Okay, so as Arnel mentioned, we are pretty much the boss or also the governing board for the AHA Center. So all the National Disaster Management Organization, or NDMOs we call, so become the pretty much will determine whether during the disaster, for example, Palu, so we're going to have like a urgent governing board meeting, maybe sometimes using the video conference, telling that the Palus need like this, and then they might need like this. Before Azad Iraq being sent to the, because Azad Iraq is actually a tool of ASEAN. So every 10 member states have to agree that we're going to send Azad Iraq to the affected state. It's not actually even though AHA Center office in Jakarta, but that's not necessarily AHA Center the one that made the call. Okay? But somehow it needs to be accepted by the states. So when it comes to civil military coordination in Hadr, so I pretty much summarized a bit. So we may divide it into national disaster, and another one would be complex emergency. So when during the national disaster, will we use the MKN or Directive number 20? But somehow for the complex emergency, will be perhaps 18 or 21. It will be under the National Security Council, but still using the National Security Council Directive, which is chaired by the Prime Minister. So regional guideline, we have numbers. So Arnel already mentioned about ADMA, AJPRP, SASOC Chapter 6, Oslo guideline internationally, and also specifically as the Asia-Pacific regional. And for the complex emergency, there's a numbers of also another guideline. Perhaps, I'm sure that you guys already know and well. For the civil military coordination in Hadr, they have two coordination agencies. One will be AHA Center. So Arnel Capili is one of the deputy Deputy Executive Director. And normally, as you can see, we're quite close. When it comes to ASEAN, normally me and Arnel will always discuss and how exactly the initiative or the way forward when it comes to response in ASEAN. So Nidhi will always help me, support me during the civil military coordination when it comes to United Nations mechanism. Right. So it's just pretty much you can see there's two entities here which will actually support NDMOs of ASEAN during the difficulties if the affected state accepts. So this is pretty much the initiative by the ASEAN. So at the civilian portion would be like one ASEAN responding to disaster as one region outside the region as one. And then ASEAN itself, ASEAN Iraq, and we have DESA. DESA is like a stockpile, but it's, even though it's actually now it's regionally at this Subang, but somehow there's a new satellite warehouse in China, Thailand, and also another one in Philippines. So DASA is actually a stockpile by ASEAN to the ASEAN people. And same also here, DASA, if want to be deployed to the United States, will also be coordinated by the ASEAN country. There's another SINCOD initiative also within the ASEAN, which is MRG, which I believe that we already heard this morning. And there's also a SASOC, Chapter 6, also one of it. ACMM in Thailand, right? The center for the military medicine, and also logistics support framework, I think like lead by Brunei. Yeah, good. So, as pretty much like I try to make it, I hope you guys understand, but yeah, it's pretty much like in Malaysia, we can see national, NAMA is actually lead coordinators, and we have EOC, Emergency Operations Center, to actually at the national level coordinate all the operations during the level 3 disasters. So there's also will be on-scene command post, OSCP, which actually will be led by the police. So during disaster, if, for example, Malaysia require the international assistance, normally we will go for the regional first. So you can see we're going to use a SASOC if we want request or any ASEAN states want to offer assistance. So from there, AHA Center become the coordinators, and AHA Center as ASEAN will deploy Iraq, and to Iraq will actually sort of establish the JOCA, the field coordination at the site. Depends on the actually the acceptance of the NAMA. If NAMA wants them to be at the operational level, they will be near with the NDOCC, National Disaster Operation Coordination Center. But if we want them to support on the field coordination, they will work closely with the OSCP. Then, same goes to when it comes to non-ASEAN assistance states. So UN OCHA will actually deal or coordinate with the assistance, including the international humanitarian community, IFRC, and International Humanitarian Office, and the UN office. And as Mini mentioned, UN OCHA will actually perhaps deploy UNDAC, which they will establish the OSOC. Yeah, that's numbers of acronym. So sorry for that. And if there would be like a foreign military forces would like to have been accepted to actually help the Malaysia, then perhaps the military, Ministry of Defense will actually establish the MNCC, depends on the SOP. But MNCC actually will help to coordinate among the foreign military forces and work together with the Humanitarian Military Operation Coordination Center, which is for the humanitarian. This is pretty much like the concept. Same like Arnel said, this would be lovely on the paper, but it would be like lovely also during the day, hopefully. Okay. So during Padu earthquake 2018, the lesson learned that because I'm also actually involved in the Padu 2018, the one that we noticed that actually become now the new initiative in Malaysia will be first the RDC, Reception Departure Center. It is important to register all the incoming actors that actually want to help the affected state. So this is actually in Padu. So they have like a Ministry of Foreign Affairs there, Immigration, actually doing the registration for any incoming actors. So you can see Iraq at the blue would be UNDAC, and then the yellow vest will be Iraq. So whenever you actually went to affected states, and you can see the blue vest, that one is from UN, and normally the brown vest would be for ASEAN Iraq. Okay? So another one from the lesson learned that we had in Padu would be the interoperability of JOCA and OSOC. You can okay, so you can see like here where we can see, oh, there's Nidhi, the stripe. So Nidhi is also involved during the UNDAP. So in the Palu, we can see, Arnel said like the MPP only accept the area to lead all the international assistance coming. So as the UNDAP and also and the UN organization, we actually work closely together. But you may see actually there's a presence of the uniqueness of collaboration between OSOC and JOCA during Palu. So that's why in Malaysia, we sort of like integrate these two operations, become JOCA, Joint Operation Coordination Center for International Assistance. Because JOCA only for ASEAN, OSOC only for non-ASEAN, but if in Malaysia, we want it to be in one post and becomes the international assistance doing the one single stock center, pretty much. Okay? So during Palu also, we may see numbers of cluster coordination meetings. So during Palu, I have to attend all the cluster coordination meetings. Thanks to Binti. So during that time, so I really can see if it works in Indonesia on the cluster mechanism coined by the United Nations, then I believe that in Malaysia, we may adapt the best practices. But maybe globally we have 11 clusters, but in Malaysia, we now will just go for 9 clusters. But it's actually comprehensively involved with all those 11 thematic groups. Okay? And so this is pretty much that I mentioned about the latest initiative. Okay? Okay, sorry. Okay, so we have like, first will be the RDC, and then remember when I mentioned about Georgia, when I put all the one-stop center, all the coordination center, whether from the ASEAN or whether from the United Nations, I put it on the same place. That's also going to be the staging area for them. And there's a new thing will be International Hadr Working Group, where they're actually going to assess whether Malaysia needs any assistance, or maybe we actually going to, the working group also we're going to assess whether any requests from any assisting state is required or not. And also we actually explore the new initiative to enhance the Hadr coordination in Malaysia. So this is pretty much actually, for now, we are actually trying to drafting SOP on Hadr. But yeah, maybe it will begin in October. So it depends on the schedule of, because it's actually involved a multi-agencies of 40 members. So based on the consensus, perhaps it will start in October. So last but not least, pretty much I just want to enhance whatever initiative, whatever tools we have, whatever mechanism we have, but we will continue to pursue to enhance the key coordination element during disasters, especially in info sharing, task division, and planning. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all 3 speakers, and as instigator, now I have to instigate them. So we have 20 minutes before we go for our break. So you heard from, is that 35,000 feet, 10,000 feet, and landing. A couple of things that came up here when OCHA talked about whole of society, when he talked about clusters. We're talking about multi-stakeholder engagement. There's a lot of training required, and training requires simulation for coordination, and these require costs. And how do we do it? So let's hear from OCHA later. How does this capacity building? And on top of that, after training all these people, the turnover rate must be 75%. Then when an incident happens in 2 years' time, we are not ready. So how do we handle the challenges? And we go to AHA Center. I was perplexed when you say no arms, because sometimes when a disaster happens, the wild animals are still there, like wild boar, and also you're carrying food. There will be people rushing to come to take the food. You need to do force protection. So you have the convoy protection and all that. So how do you manage that? And also, Admiral was said that it's something that is binding. If it's binding, then what is the punishment if you don't conform to it by the government? So let's look at that. And then the assessment. How do you go and assess? You said that we need more military people to come and assess. That means you need some training. So what are the training syllabus? Can the country itself train the military assessment? MiDAS is here. We have a lot of military personnel here. Could MiDAS also help to train assessment teams, for example, in Malaysia? So, you know, this is one of the questions that we can look at. Now, back to NADMA. NADMA, I was very happy when NADMA talked about disaster risk reduction, adaptation for climate change, you know. So, they talked about risk mitigation and adaptation, which is actually prevention better than cure. 70% is actually prevention, identifying hotspots and this and that. And then she talked about disaster response. She also talked about recovery, which nobody else talked about. So then we have a challenge now. We have the whole of society, and then we have AMRG. And then we try to connect the first session with the second session, which say that no military last. But the first session say AMRG first, military first. And then we are here talking about whole of society. How do we consolidate all this for NADMA? Even NADMA has 2 MKN directives, which is 20 and 18. And right now they say they are planning the SOP and all that. So all these require simulation, training, coordinated effort, and a lot of cost. So before we start taking questions, just 2 minutes each on what I posed to 3 of you. Could you please succinctly explain? Thank you.
So on the trainings, a lot of what we do, what we want to do, also depend on people understanding of what we are planning to do, and that's come to training and education. And yes, sustainability, every training has a cost. Good training is always expensive. And I have come to that conclusion. There's no such thing as cheap training good. So a lot of good training require a lot of resources. And so, but a lot, actually surprisingly, donors, so we depend on donors for funding, right, for these trainings, and many donors actually see the benefit of this training because they see that when such thing happens and there was lack of capacity or lack of capacity built because lack of training, it's actually cost more than putting money and training people. Although I admit that the total turnover is high, and I give you an example of the UM-SIPCOT course that we do. And this is the problem and challenge with many trainings. Every time we train roughly 25 students in one course, it costs about 5,000, 3,000 to 5,000 US dollars to run it. And out of the 25, 5 may continue to pursue and do something on SIPCOT in particular. But we can never disregard the importance of that particular training because those 5 could actually contribute more. And those 20 people who may not work on UM-SIPCOT in particular will continue to advocate for the broader understanding of civil-military coordination, though they may not be the one doing the SIPCOT work themselves. So we always find donor who's interested in supporting different trainings, and we try to make sure that it's as relevant as possible, but we understand the limitations as well.
Okay, next to our center.
Thank you, Murni. Interesting questions. I have very short answers. One, why are they not allowed to carry arms? Because the responsibility of force protection is with the national military of the affected country. So foreign militaries cannot bring arms, and the responsibility is with the national militaries of the affected country. Number 2, assessment, military, defense sector. Yes, AHA sector is now moving towards localization of the ERA. We want to get more, we want to bring down the ERA induction course to the countries so we can do it according to how the countries think they need ERA. So the trainings will be customized, the language will be customized as well. So in the next few years, we have more local ERA. It's probably going to be MERA, Malaysian Emergency Response Assessment Team, or PERA in the Philippines, whatever title it will be, as long as it will configure to the country based on how they want it to be localized. Third, what is the punishment for not complying with Hadr? The punishment is they're going to face a lot of disasters. That's enough of them.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Rahman. Rahman, just 1 minute. You said that you want to open an international coordination center because you said JOCA and also different entities. But if the military is coming in, you need to have a status of force agreement, status of military agreement, visiting forces agreement. So would you elaborate on that? Without that, would the MNCC function without these agreements on a national level? Thanks.
So I mean, it's pretty much like, do I need to answer both the questions? I mean, 2 minutes only enough.
Yeah.
So it's just like, first will be when you mentioned about training. As Arnel said, because like as you always know, once Iraq, forever Iraq. Whether you move to other ministry, whether you already, not civil servant anymore, or you always Iraq when you actually been certified as Iraq. So because like UNDAP have like a contract, but somehow as long as UNDAP train, it is enough for us. As long as everyone's alert and have a concern and also have a knowledge when it comes to disaster risk reduction. So when you mention about NAMA is actually pretty much coordinating all those training, all those simulations. Regionally, we have like RDEX, ASEAN Regional Disasters Exercise. And we also have DREX for ARF, ASEAN Regional Forums for Exercise for Disaster. And we also have the CNEX also for the UN, for regional, for Asia Pacific. So it's pretty much, it's also allowed for not only NAMA, but whoever Malaysian responder involved during the exercise can actually feel or experience how is it going to be when international assistance coming on back. And this is how hectic it's going to be. Who is actually the artist? And that kind of simulation is really important because it's not only about understanding the mechanism of the SOPs, what's actually being adopted, but also the people. Yeah. And when you mentioned about our initiative will be putting in all coordination center in one center, JOCIA, Joint Operation Coordination Center for International Assistance. It pretty much, you can see also, because we know also there's always what we call similar task reporting sometimes. So we want to make sure that every data came out from NAMA will be actually exactly accurate, correct, when it goes to the report in our center or also the UN. So that's why by having this one coordination center, one-stop center, so we may actually help to have a better coordination and also for better education.
And that also give room for better coordinated media release and public statements and all that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have 15 minutes. I've just extended 5 minutes from your tea time. So it's 3:20 now. Additional 10 and 5 bonus. So 15 minutes for you all to ask. First round of questions, we will take a couple of you, and then if there's time available, we'll go for the second round. So, anybody hungry for questions? Has all the questions been answered? Or shall I call out now? Yes, they want to ask the questions to you now. Yes, sure. You can ask them. Okay, let's get Ashura. Dr. Ashura has been working with a lot of maritime security and safety issues, and I'm sure she will come up with some probing questions.
Thanks for the introduction. Really great question. There's a lot of emphasis on ASEAN and a regional response to PGDR, which I think is good due to the fact that as a maritime security research organization, we don't have enough literature for us to work with. I'm also interested though in extra regional collaboration. We perhaps talked to maybe emphasis on how ASEAN works with organizations from the region. Any evidence of them working with, I don't know, IORA or any Indian Ocean region associations?
Ocha maybe can answer the one, perhaps AHA, because Indonesia is quite active in IORA. So IORA members who is Malaysia. So
No, thank you for the question. I think the future now is getting more regional organizations involved in humanitarian assistance. A lot are being set up. In particular, we've hosted several organizations already at the center. We were visited by SARC, South Asia Regional Body, and they wanted to set up a similar organization in the South Asia region. Recently, we were visited by African Union. African Union would like to create their own AHA Center, African Humanitarian Assistance Center. So I think we are becoming a model, ASEAN. We are becoming a model for other regional organizations because they're setting it up and they're learning from our experience. I think this is the time where we reverse the seating arrangement. We have the experience here. We have all the disasters here. We're #1 in the world. We should tell our story. We should teach the world what our experience is. Now we reverse the seating arrangement. We stand in front and tell them our experience.
Yes, I think telling disaster stories from ASEAN will be a good idea to share. Just for your information, IORA, Indian Ocean Reef Association, has 8 priority areas. Disaster management is one of the priority areas. So they have priority area 6, which is maritime safety and security. So perhaps this is what Dr. Ashura was talking about Indian Ocean. I want to pick Major Murni from Global SAR to maybe share with us how do you see INSARAC on search and rescue, which was mentioned just now on us, and how search and rescue, the efforts made by Global SAR for regional search and rescue. How do you see this disaster management and search and rescue working hand in hand with two completely different platforms? No? Nothing? Okay, we'll take the next question. Yes, the lady with the glasses.
Good afternoon. I'm Huan from the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. So my question is for Mr. Capili, also on the AHA Center. So currently, the percentage of ads channeled to the affected states are mostly bilaterally. So what is the problem? Why countries doesn't want to contact with the AHA to call for assistance?
Interesting question.
Thank you. For the next question, please ask the other two, the feeling left out. One, I think because not many countries are aware, not a lot of member states are aware of the ASEAN mechanism. I think we need to do more. Particularly because in terms of offering assistance, it's the MOFA side of things. And we deal with the NDMO. That's why I think we're missing, there's a gap. So that's why we need to reach out more to the MOFA so that they understand the mechanism and the tools that we have. Number two, I think ASEAN should be able to develop some sort of a advantage of using the ASEAN mechanism. Like for example, within the EU framework, the civil protection program that they have, if they go through the EU mechanism, logistics, transportation, they take care about 70–80% subsidized. We don't have that right now in ASEAN. So if we had an added value in terms of defraying the cost or being able to lessen the cost of sending the search teams, sending the relief items, perhaps they would prefer to use the ASEAN mechanism in the future. So to all our ASEAN member states, I think we need to think about how we can add value and provide more support if you're deploying by giving an incentive on using the ASEAN mechanism.
St. Andrews University, Glasgow, did a study on the nexus between peacekeeping and disaster relief. You see, the big difference between these two is, one you get reimbursement, the other one you pay. So for disaster relief, you don't get any reimbursement, you have to pay for it. And if you start using your Lamborghini and Ferrari, you have to pay for the maintenance of the Lamborghini and Ferrari. Which is why some countries say, do not send your military, because these are the Lamborghinis and Ferraris of the country. Because you have to pay for the wear and tear and maintenance and all that. Whilst you can actually have some mechanisms for civilian participation as a platform to carry logistics. And you can sign service level agreements with many countries. So I want to, we have another 4 minutes. Yes, we have one from Dr. Amin there at the back from the first session. There's always a need of a doctor when the health is going down.
I thought you never will be able to see me.
Oh, you're so far.
Yeah, because you only look at ladies.
I saw that. Yeah, go ahead.
So let me share. Thank you, Martin. It's nice to see all those young people up there. young people from ASEAN country talking about humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. When I was involved in the earthquake in Flores Island in 1992, this was not in existence. What present was basically TNI, Malaysian Armed Forces. We have a representative from Australia and JICA from Japan. These are the international humanitarian actors, and it's nice to see. And it's nice to hear a lot of procedures. And I don't have to remind what happened in Katrina. Procedures is there, and procedure failed. And that's where disaster happened again. Okay? So, where are we going? What's important is leadership. That's why certain countries, they resort to bilateral arrangement, because they believe in that leadership. When the dam broke in Laos, ASEAN offered a lot of them. We contacted, and it's a good thing now. I can speak to the chief medical officer, the Laotian people, Amin, and tell, do you need my help? When the thing happened in Palu, I called the Surgeon General of the TNI and asked him, do you need my help? And he will say, we can handle it. We don't have to grip in darkness now. We know what our partners will be able to do. But what's important is leadership. And that's where AHA Center, it had all the mechanism, but it is still yet to develop to be a recognized leader in humanitarian assistance. Unless the AHA Center come up to that level, then the country will still resort to those sort of arrangements. And the other thing that good that we need to observe and appreciate that most countries in ASEAN has equipped themselves better to manage disaster. And that is a good sign. That is a good sign. And thank you, Arnel, for mentioning the super disaster that we are facing. But let's say the super cyclone in hurricane in Tacloban, where are the people coming from? Suddenly we have people coming from Israel. We have the British coming from UK. 1 month later. What does this signify? There's still geopolitical issues in disaster assistance. This is where we need to protect. This is where we need to ensure that humanitarian assistance should be purely humanitarian assistance. Let the region assist the region. If the region will not be able to assist, then let's get that on the side, at least from the UN.
Thank you. Thank you. Words of wisdom from the doctor in the house. Could I take a lead from Konrad Adenauer's symptom? That nobody's talked about Konrad Adenauer's symptom. German technology. So, could I, sir, ask if German technology can be used for disaster risk mitigation and adaptation, identifying hotspots, trend analysis on rising tides and all that. So at least we will be prepared for a disaster. What do you all think of technology like like the technology from Europe coming into ASEAN, slowly building up, like what the doctor said, charity begin at home and then it goes to the region. So could we use this as the final icing on the cake before we finish off the session? Start from ground level, right now.
So yeah, of course, like you can see like when Arnel and Nidhi highlighting all the tools, it's evolved, and of course I'm also the IT bachelor. So it's like, it's evolved ICT, of course, you know, with that technology. Technology advancements really help the disaster response and also disaster risk reduction. So, but it's not necessary when you mention about the international technologies, somehow the local knowledge is also important, because sometimes it's not necessary to install all those technologies, but actually it's not really appropriate, and sometimes the victims, the vulnerable people are actually the ones who can really understand the risk. Yeah, but of course, I acknowledge the technology advancement really help the disaster mitigation.
How's that?
Thank you. We're talking about technology, and tomorrow I have another session. So this is an invitation to everyone. Tomorrow I have another session talking about this. What is the future in the region? But these are things that we can leverage on. For example, disaster impact modeling. Right now we are quite big data analysis. So things like that can help us in the future. And I'd like to address the point of Dato earlier. I think the measure of our success at the ASEAN about the member state is that when there is no need for AHA Center anymore. That is where we will say that all member states have the capacity, they are resilient, and they don't need us anymore. That's a measure of success.
So I'll probably give you another funny example on the flip side about technologies. For example, this whole remote sensing idea, right? So during Palu earthquake, everyone keeps saying, oh, we want high resolution image. And I said, what do you want to know? We want to know whether the runway is working. Okay, easier, you get on a car, go there, and look whether, sometimes people get this whole remote sensing imagery is it's one of the many technology we're talking about. It's getting very exciting, and people ask, and they request for imagery all the time. And actually when you ask, what are you going to do with this imagery? Not really, we're just going to plan our operation, right? When you plan operation, you don't need high resolution images, for example. So technology is cool, but you just have to apply it, because every technology also comes with a cost. At least, although the imagery is free, it takes time for you to request for it, and it takes a lot of internet bandwidth to download it during emergency. So it's kind of both sides, I think. And the drone is another one. When the drone first came in, everyone was very happy that, oh, in the next emergency, let's take out the drone and fly around and take the picture. And then they realized, actually, we don't know how to fly the unmanned vehicle. It's all play with your remote drone before. It's not that simple that you can just take the drone out of the box and fly it. And then you realize to put all the image from the drone together and make it into a meaningful imagery, take another supercomputer, for example. So all this technology interesting, but also pick the right one for the right particular purpose and apps.
Thank you. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we passed 4 minutes for our tea time. Thank you very much for not sleeping. So please give a round of applause to our speakers. That's all we have for you today. I hand you over to the organizers.
Thank you once again.